welcome to Reading for Pleasure with me. I'm going to continue reading 10 True Tales, Titanic Young Survivors by Alan Zullo. For our narrative journey introduction, I did read a little bit of the introductory paragraph. This chapter is called, Is the Titanic Doomed? Edith Brown. The idea that the Titanic was fated for disaster never crossed Edith Brown's mind. Such a notion seemed ridiculous to the 15-year-old South African, but that disturbing thought did occur to her on the third day of the voyage. It happened while Edith and her mother Elizabeth were each reading a book in the ship's second-class library. A strange middle-aged woman walked over and struck up a conversation with Elizabeth. Edith paid little attention until the woman said, "There's something about this ship that I find unsettling." Putting down her book, Edith was now all ears. Elizabeth, who by nature was a nervous person, cast an anxious glance toward Edith before asking the woman, "In what way?" "Quite frankly, I can't put my finger on it, but when we were in Queenstown, I felt kind of panicky. I wanted my husband to cancel the remainder of the voyage and get me off." The woman said that she and her husband had crossed the Atlantic several times before, but this was the first time she had ever felt this tense. "Since I've been on this ship, I haven't slept a wink. I've been feeling uneasy the whole time." Knowing how natural it was to become jittery herself, Elizabeth decided to end the conversation, telling the woman, "I do hope you get a good night's sleep and settle down a bit as the trip goes on." Then Elizabeth returned to her book. After the woman, whom neither saw again, left the library, Edith said, "Well, that was odd." She immediately thought of the disturbing moment during boarding when she, her mother, and her father Thomas were walking up the gangway of the Titanic in Southampton. Thomas suddenly became faint. His legs began to buckle, forcing him to grab the railing to keep from falling. "What on earth is the matter, Tom?" Elizabeth said, rushing to his aid. "I don't know, my dear," he replied, wiping his brow. "You're shaking, and you're as pale as a ghost." To Elizabeth, it looked as though he had seen a ghost. After taking a few deep breaths, he stood up and said, "I think I'm over it now." His legs steady again, he motioned to Elizabeth and Edith. "Let's get on board." Here in the library, Elizabeth wondered out loud, "Is it possible Father had the same kind of premonition as that lady when we boarded?" "I shouldn't tell you this because I don't want you to worry," Elizabeth said, "but Father admitted to me later that he was overcome with a feeling that something bad was going to happen." She nervously tapped her fingers on her book. "Should we be worried?" Edith shook her head. "Nothing bad's going to happen. This ship is unsinkable." She didn't dare tell her mother what Thomas had said on the day of departure, when the Titanic nearly collided with another ship. As the Titanic was leaving the narrow channel in the harbour of Southampton, it moved past the American liner New York, which was moored alongside another ship. The suction of the triple propeller Titanic was so powerful that the hawsers of the SS New York snapped off, causing dock workers to flee to avoid getting hit by the dangerous flying ends of the mooring ropes. The only hawser that didn't break was the one holding the bow. The stern of the New York swung out toward the port side of the Titanic. In the nick of time, tugboats moved into position and nudged the New York just enough so that the Titanic cleared the stern of the ship by only a few feet. After the close call, Edith's father muttered to her, "This is a bad omen." He also wasn't pleased that the Titanic had departed behind schedule, claiming, "A ship leaving late spells bad luck." Thinking about her family's history, Edith wondered if her father had said that because of what happened to his brother. Years earlier, Thomas's brother had captained a ship that sank at sea in a tragedy that took his life. Then there was a bizarre incident mentioned by 12-year-old Bertha Watt, a fellow second-class passenger. On the afternoon of the Titanic's departure, Bertha had accompanied her mother to tea with several ladies. A woman at the table practiced the ancient art of reading tea leaves, a belief that a pattern made by the tea leaves at the bottom of a finished cup can tell the future of the tea drinker. After studying the empty cup of one of the ladies for several minutes, the tea leaf reader shook her head and admitted, "This is strange. I can't see anything. It's like there's just a blank wall and nothing beyond." "Is the Titanic doomed?" Edith wondered. She immediately pushed such an unpleasant thought from her mind. After all, this was the most thrilling time of her young life. She and her parents had left their home in Cape Town, South Africa, with plans to create a new life in Seattle, Washington. 60-year-old father Thomas was a well-respected investor and owner of several hotels in South Africa. Sporting a bushy moustache and always looking dapper, he was 20 years older than Elizabeth, a sweet-natured woman devoted to family and friends. Edith's parents doted on her, especially after her younger sister, Dorothy, died in 1908 at the age of 8 from diphtheria. Edith, who looked much younger than her age because she was short and slender, was given the best education possible. She and her parents often travelled to London to shop for clothes for themselves and fixtures for Thomas's hotels. Encouraged by Elizabeth's sister Josephine, who lived in Seattle, the Browns decided to move there so Thomas could operate a new hotel. In February 1912, Edith and her parents sailed to England and spent several weeks in London, where Thomas booked a second-class passage on the Titanic. For his American adventure, Thomas bought linens, tableware, china, furnishings and hotel equipment, which were put in the ship's cargo hold. Meanwhile, Edith and her mother went sightseeing and shopping. They bought the latest fashions, including full-length wool coats with velvet cuffs and lapels, feathered and wide-brimmed hats, and button-up leather boots. The rest of their worldly possessions were kept in Thomas's leather Gladstone bag, a cross between a small suitcase and a large briefcase. The bag held cash, jewellery, gold coins, and important documents. Thomas also wore a money belt, which hid cash in a concealed compartment, and had gold coins sewn in his formal vests and in the hems of the women's coats. In those days it was considered the safest way to travel with money. Edith had never seen her parents in such high spirits. She, too, was caught up in the happy anticipation of the Titanic's maiden voyage and a promising future in America. Her brain whirled with questions about the trip. Will I get to wear all the pretty dresses Mother and Father bought me? Will I meet people my own age on the ship? Will there be dancing? Will I like Seattle? Will I make friends? Will I go to school or work in Father's hotel? She could barely wait to live out the answers. The Browns took the train from London directly to Southampton docks, where Edith got her first glimpse of the Titanic. It's so big and beautiful, she marvelled. The ship's white superstructure towered above its massive black hull. Wisps of smoke curled out of 3 of its 4 buff-coloured, black-tipped funnels as the morning sun lit up the brass-ringed portholes. Baggage carts, supply wagons and cargo containers were pushed and pulled into position, while cranes lowered freight into the holds. Early arriving passengers were already on the top deck, called the boat deck, leaning against the railing and waving to well-wishers below. Porters were scurrying up and down the 3 gangways, carrying boxes, packages and flowers. As Edith and her parents headed up the passenger gangway, her mounting excitement was interrupted by Thomas's near-fainting spell. Once he recovered, they hurried to their cabins. To save money, Edith and her mother shared a cabin on Deck E, while Thomas shared a single bunk bed cabin with a male passenger. Edith took the top bunk, which, like the others, had curtains for privacy, big white pillows and crisp white sheets under a bedspread with the White Star logo in the centre. Over the next few days, Edith made new friends, but spent most of the time curled up with a good book in the wood-panelled, well-stocked library. On Saturday, the 4th day of the voyage, the Browns were lounging outside on deck chairs when the Titanic's 62-year-old captain, Edward John Smith, stopped to chat with them. He looked every bit the part of a captain, dressed in navy blue jacket adorned with 4 gold rings around each cuff, sharply creased navy blue pants, and black patent leather shoes. "Are you enjoying the voyage?" he asked them. "It's been a most pleasurable experience," Thomas answered. Turning his attention to Edith, the captain stroked his thick white beard and asked her, "And how about you, young lady?" "It's the best ship we've ever been on," she replied. The captain chuckled and said, "I'm glad to hear that." Thomas asked, "Is the ship running on schedule?" "Yes, we're making good time because of the excellent weather so far," the captain replied. "The temperature will likely drop over the next few days, but that won't have any effect on arriving in New York on time, and I must now bid you goodbye. Have a pleasant day." He gave a half salute and walked on to talk with the other passengers. The next day, Sunday, the Browns attended church services in the dining saloon, but spent the rest of the day below decks because it had turned cold outside. Before dinner that evening, the family braved the chill for a quick stroll and admired the beautiful sunset that had turned the glass-like sea of vibrant gold. At dinner they engaged in a lively conversation with their regular dining companions, the Reverend Ernest Carter and his wife Lillian, who were from a small, poor parish near London. For the personable middle-aged couple, who had never been to America, this was a long-planned trip of a lifetime, partially paid for by donations from parishioners. "It's so cold outside," Edith remarked. "Indeed it is," said Reverend Carter. "A steward told me some of the other ships in the area have reported on the Marconi that they saw ice fields." "Oh, I hope we see an iceberg," said Edith. After dinner, the Browns joined about 100 people at a hymn sing conducted by Reverend Carter in the second-class lounge. He introduced each hymn with a story about its origin. Among the songs was "For Those in Peril on the Sea," which would soon prove, sadly, to be a fitting choice. At the end of the hymn sing, Reverend Carter said, "It's the first time that hymns have been sung on this boat, but we trust and pray it won't be the last." At 10 p.m, Thomas escorted Edith and her mother to their cabin, and then went to the smoking lounge. The two fell fast asleep. At 11:40 p.m, they were awakened by a shudder and several bumps. Edith jumped out of the top berth, opened the porthole, stuck her head out, and stared into the blackness. The reflection of the lights from the ship danced gently on the calm sea. Looking toward the stern, she noticed the propellers were churning up the water and causing a distinct vibration that caused glasses on the washstand to clink and the cabin to squeak and rattle. "I wonder what that is all about," Elizabeth said. Minutes later, the vibration stopped, and so had the engines. Edith sat next to her mother and said, "Everything seems so quiet." Join me tomorrow for the next installment.